You ever have one of those moments where something totally normal suddenly flips and you realize you're way out of your depth? Yeah, that was me last Friday night. My boss, Darren, who by the way, is about as intimidating as a grizzly bear in a suit, gave me a ride home after work. Nothing crazy there, right? Except, just as we pulled into my apartment complex, he locked the car doors. Like, clicked the locks, and then looked at me. That's where things stopped being normal. Let me back up a bit so this doesn't sound like some random creep story. I work at a marketing agency downtown. Darren's the kind of boss who keeps things efficient and a little intense, but fair. He's mid-30s, always in those sharp button-downs with rolled-up sleeves, and he's got this scruffy beard that makes him look like he just stepped out of a coffee shop shoot for some indie magazine. Honestly, I've been crushing on him for months, but there's zero chance he sees me that way. He's just my boss. Or so I thought. That night, I was stuck late finishing a presentation. The office was mostly empty, and Darren was the last one packing up too. Usually, I'd take the bus home, which is a 45-minute slog through traffic and weird smells, but Darren surprised me by saying, "Need a lift? I'm heading your way." I was caught off guard, but also kind of thrilled. I mean, how often does your boss offer to drive you home? I said yes without thinking twice. We drove through the city streets, the cab's radio quietly playing some classic rock station. It was oddly comfortable, with Darren cracking a few jokes about how my spreadsheet could use a little spice. I laughed and felt my nerves settle. This wasn't just a ride home anymore. It felt like a tiny window into a different side of him. Maybe the one nobody else got to see. Then we pulled into the lot of my building. I was about to open the door when I noticed Darren reach over and lock all the doors. Just like that. I blinked. Maybe he was joking? But then he didn't hand me the keys or say anything to ease the moment. He just looked over at me with this serious, almost unreadable expression. I'm not gonna lie, I felt my heart start pounding, but not in the usual way. It was like something electric had shifted between us, and suddenly I was hyper-aware of every little thing. The way his eyes caught the dim streetlight, the subtle scent of cologne mixed with something warm I couldn't place, the quiet hum of the car around us. "Wait, why'd you lock the doors?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, but I'm pretty sure it came out way too shaky. He didn't answer immediately, just looked at me, and that's when I realized this ride home was about to become the most unexpected night of my life. He finally broke the silence with this half smile, the kind that made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't quite explain. "Just wanted to make sure you were paying attention," he said, voice low enough that I had to lean in a little to catch it. Like, maybe he didn't want anyone else hearing. I raised an eyebrow, feeling this weird mix of amusement and something deeper I wasn't prepared for. Attention to what? The fact that my boss suddenly turns into a car locksmith? Darren chuckled softly, and I swear, that sound alone made the air thicker around us. Then he shifted in his seat, his eyes locking with mine in a way that felt less like a boss-to-employee stare and more like something else, something electric. "You," he said simply, just one word, but it hit me like a slap. Not in a bad way, just unexpected. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my cool, but my mouth suddenly felt dry. "Me? What about me?" He leaned closer, not enough to be creepy, but close enough that I could see the fine lines around his eyes and the slight curl of his lips. "I've noticed you for a while, you know. At work, not just your work, everything." My brain short-circuited for a second. Was he messing with me? Maybe I was misreading all the signs, but the way he said it felt genuine, like he'd been holding this in for months. "I'm not sure I'm following," I said, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably. Darren's smile softened, and then he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small folded paper. He unfolded it carefully and handed it to me. On it was a list. Dates, times, little notes. It looked like some sort of schedule. But then I realized it wasn't work-related. It was moments he'd noticed me, like when I stayed late to finish a project, when I laughed a little too loud at a meeting, even when I spilled coffee near the printer that one time. "You kept a log?" I asked, incredulous, then laughed nervously. "You're really something else," he shrugged. looking a little embarrassed but also proud. Yeah, I guess I am. But that's the point. I've been watching, and I kind of wanted to see if you felt the same. If I'm being honest, I wasn't sure how to say it without being awkward. My heart was pounding now, louder than before. I looked down at the list again, then back at him. I don't know what to say. I mean, I've had my own little crush, but never thought someone like you would. Me? He finished for me, voice gentle. Yeah, me. We sat there for a moment, the silence less heavy this time. I could feel the warmth from his side, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. Finally, I blurted out, "So, what happens now? You lock me in a car and confess your feelings?" Darren laughed, the sound a little shaky but sincere. Maybe. Or maybe we start with a real conversation outside the car. The thought of stepping out into the night with him felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I wasn't sure where this was headed, but for once, not knowing felt kind of nice. I unlocked my door, and he did the same on his side. As we climbed out, the cool air hit me, and I felt grounded again. Darren looked at me with this question in his eyes, like he was waiting for permission to keep going. I smiled, feeling a bit braver than I had all week. "Let's talk," I said, "but maybe somewhere with better lighting." He nodded, and together we walked toward the building, leaving the locked car and the walls we'd both built behind us. We ended up sitting on the low stone wall near the lobby entrance, the glow from the streetlights casting long shadows around us. It was still early enough that a few neighbors were coming and going, but the whole scene felt private, like the city had dimmed the lights just for us. I glanced over at Darren, who was running a hand through his hair, a little nervous, and honestly, kind of adorable. "So," I said, trying to break the silence, "how long have you been keeping that, log?" He smirked. "Longer than I'm proud to admit. Maybe since around the time you started pulling those late nights." I laughed softly, picturing myself hunched over my laptop, red-eyed and probably muttering to myself about deadlines. "You were really paying that much attention?" "Yeah, it's silly, I know. But every moment you were working late or seemed stressed, I just wanted to be there in some way." I guess I didn't know how else to show it. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I'd always thought of him as this impenetrable guy, all business and no nonsense. But here, now, he was just Darren, the guy who'd been silently rooting for me all along. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He shrugged again, but there was a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "Fear. I'm a terrible romantic, and I didn't want to mess up what we have at work. Plus, I wasn't sure if you felt the same." I reached out, squeezing his hand. "I've definitely felt something. I just didn't expect you to feel it too." He smiled, a slow, genuine grin that made my heart stutter. "So what now? Do we pretend this didn't happen Monday through Friday, 9 to 5? I shook my head. "No way. I want to see where this goes. But maybe we should figure out how to navigate the whole boss-employee thing without it turning into a soap opera." He laughed, the sound warm and full of relief. "Deal. No soap operas." For a moment, we just sat there, letting the quiet stretch between us. Then Darren leaned in, just a little, and I caught the faintest scent of cedarwood and something sweet. Maybe vanilla? It was comforting, familiar. He didn't kiss me, not yet, but the air between us felt charged, like it was only a breath away. "I'm glad you said yes," he murmured. "Me too," I replied, already knowing this was the start of something neither of us expected but both desperately wanted. Before we knew it, the night was deepening, and the lobby lights flickered off, signaling closing time. We stood up, still holding hands, and walked toward the elevator. As we went up, I felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. This was new territory, but with Darren beside me, it felt like I could handle whatever came next. When we reached my floor, he hesitated at my door. "Can I come in for a minute? Talk some more?" I nodded, stepping aside. Once inside, the apartment felt small and cozy, the soft hum of the city outside filtering in through the window. Darren took off his jacket and hung it on the back of a chair, then looked around like he was trying to take it all in. So he said, breaking the silence, "What do you want to do now? We've got the confessions out of the way. Now comes the fun part." I grinned, feeling bolder than I had all night. "Honestly, I want to know everything about you. The real Darren. Not the boss version." He laughed again, that easy, genuine laugh, and sat down on the couch, patting the cushion next to him. "Okay, deal. But you owe me one in return." I sat down beside him, my heart still racing, but feeling more at ease than I had in a long time. "I'm ready." For the next couple of hours, we traded stories about our childhoods, our dreams, the weird quirks that make us who we are. Darren told me about growing up in a small town, how he got into marketing almost by accident, and the time he tried to learn guitar but gave up after a week. I shared my own stories, some embarrassing, some hopeful. Somewhere between the laughter and the quiet moments, I realized this wasn't just a crush or a fantasy anymore. This was real. And even though we had a million things to figure out, work boundaries, what people might say, I was ready to see where this ride could take us. Because sometimes, the unexpected moments, the ones where doors lock and worlds shift, are exactly what you need to find something worth holding on to. And that night, with Darren beside me, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I'd found it. We must have lost track of time. Somewhere around midnight, the city sounds outside faded into this quiet hum that made the apartment feel like our own little world. Darren was sprawled on the couch, one arm lazily draped over the backrest, and I was sitting cross-legged on the floor, leaning against it. Somehow, talking about our pasts had opened this door to something that felt way more intimate than any date I'd ever been on. At one point, Darren looked at me and said, "You know, I always thought I had to keep this boss persona up. Serious, unshakable, all that crap. But tonight, I'm realizing how much I'm craving just to be myself, or at least the part of myself I usually hide." I nodded, feeling a pang of recognition. "Yeah, I get that. We put on these masks every day, right? And sometimes it's exhausting. But here, right now, it feels like we're shedding all that." He smiled, the kind that reaches his eyes and makes his whole face soften. Then, almost shyly, he added, "I'm glad you're here. More than I expected to be." My heart did this stupid little leap. "Me too, Darren. More than I expected." There was a beat, a charged silence, and then he reached out, his hand brushing the back of mine. The contact was light, but it sent this electric jolt running up my arm, making me suddenly hyper-aware of how close he was. I looked up, and he met my gaze without flinching. "I want to kiss you," he said, voice low. I didn't hesitate. "Then don't wait." He closed the space between us slowly, as if savoring the moment, and when his lips met mine, it was soft and warm and everything I'd been secretly hoping for. The apartment around us melted away, and all that mattered was this connection, this unexpected rush of feeling. We pulled apart just enough to smile at each other, breath mingling, and Darren's hand found the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair in a way that made me shiver. "God, I've wanted to do that for so long," he admitted. "Me too," I whispered, leaning in for another kiss. This time, it was a little deeper, more urgent. He tasted like mint and something woodsy, and I felt like I was falling into a dream. After a while, we settled back against the couch, just holding hands, letting the newness of everything settle around us. I realized I hadn't felt this seen, this understood, in a long time. So I said, breaking the silence, "How do we handle Monday? Are we pretending none of this happened?" Darren sighed, rubbing his thumb over my knuckles thoughtfully. "I don't want to pretend, but I also don't want to make things weird at work. Maybe we keep things low-key for now? See where it goes outside the office before making any big moves?" I nodded. "Sounds smart." "I'm not exactly looking forward to office gossip." "Neither am I," he agreed, smiling. "But honestly, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I'm more interested in figuring out what this could be." I grinned. "Same here." Before long, Darren glanced at his watch and groaned. "I should probably get going." "Don't want rumors starting because the boss is crashing at employees' apartments." I laughed. "Yeah, that'd be a headline." He stood, stretching, and I followed suit, walking him to the door. When he turned to leave, he hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded note. I wrote down my number, in case you want to text me something other than bossy email. I took the note, my fingers brushing his briefly. Got it. I'll definitely be texting. He smiled, his eyes lingering on me for a moment longer than necessary. Then, without another word, he slipped out into the hallway, closing the door softly behind him. Standing there, still holding the note, I felt this strange mix of disbelief and excitement. The ride home that started out so normal had turned into something I'd never anticipated. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see what came next. That night, as I lay in bed replaying everything in my mind, I realized something important. Sometimes, the best stories don't start with fireworks and grand gestures. They start with a locked door, a quiet confession, and the courage to take one small step into the unknown. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to take that step. With Darren, Monday morning hit me like a freight train. I was buzzing from the weekend, but also nervous in that way, where you're unsure if you should be excited or scared. Showing up at work after last Friday's night felt like walking into a movie where everyone knew the plot but me. And of course, the second I stepped into the office, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Darren. Just a simple, "Good morning, coffee later?" accompanied by a smiley face. My stomach flipped in a way that told me this wasn't going to be as casual as usual. I spent the day dodging awkward glances and half smiles from coworkers who had probably heard the whispers. I swear, the office grapevine moves faster than any email thread. But when Darren called me into his office for a quick meeting about a project, the tension eased a bit. His usual no-nonsense demeanor was softened by this quiet, reassuring smile he kept shooting my way. "Everything okay?" he asked once the door clicked shut. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Just processing." He nodded knowingly. "Me too." Our meeting ran smoothly, the usual brainstorming and feedback. But there was this undercurrent, like neither of us really wanted to talk about work. When it wrapped up, Darren lingered by the door. "Coffee after work?" he asked. I grinned. "Absolutely." The hours dragged until 5 o'clock, each minute feeling like a lifetime. Finally, we met up at a small cafe a few blocks away, a spot I'd never been to but instantly liked. It was quiet, cozy, the kind of place where you could talk without shouting over the usual city noise. We ordered lattes and settled into a corner booth. Darren leaned back, his eyes scanning me like he was memorizing every detail. "So," he said, breaking the easy silence, "how do you feel about all this? Us?" I sighed, swirling the foam on my latte. Honestly, scared and excited. Scared because mixing work and, well, this feels like walking a tightrope. But excited because, well, you're worth it. He smiled, his hand reaching across the table to cover mine. The warmth of his touch made my chest tighten. I feel the same. And I want to figure this out with you, no matter how complicated it gets. We can set boundaries, keep work professional, and still have something real outside those walls. I nodded, feeling a surge of hope. Deal. We talked for hours about boundaries, future hopes, and the messy, beautiful chaos of starting something new with someone who's also your boss. It wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. We knew there'd be challenges. Gossip, awkward meetings, the delicate dance of professionalism. But neither of us wanted to let fear hold us back. By the time we left, the city streets were glittering with nighttime lights, and I felt lighter than I had in months. Walking side by side, Darren slipped his arm around my shoulders. "Ready for round 2 of this adventure?" I laughed, feeling that same nervous thrill from Friday night. Ready as I'll ever be. The weeks that followed were a balancing act. We kept things low-key at work. No flirty texts during office hours, no lingering looks in meetings. But outside, our connection deepened, marked by stolen weekends, shared meals, and quiet moments that felt like home. One evening, a few weeks in, Darren surprised me by cooking dinner at his place. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the small kitchen as we laughed over a bottle of wine, the tension from workdays melting away. Who knew my boss had a secret chef side? I teased as he plated the pasta. He shrugged with a grin. I have layers. That night, as we sprawled on his couch, the city lights casting a soft glow through the windows, I realized how far we'd come from that locked car ride. From uncertainty to something real, something worth fighting for. I looked at Darren then, his eyes reflecting the gentle light, and felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest. This, I said softly, was worth every second of fear. He smiled, brushing a stray hair behind my ear. More than worth it, and in that moment, with the world outside fading away, I knew we were exactly where we were supposed to be. We were sitting on the couch, the remnants of dinner forgotten on the coffee table, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and my stomach dropped. It was a message from HR. Not the kind of message you want to see when you're casually falling for your boss. My heart raced as I tapped it open. We need to discuss a concern that's been brought to our attention regarding workplace conduct. Please come by my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. I felt a cold knot tighten in my chest. I looked up at Darren, whose expression immediately shifted from relaxed to alert. I showed him the message without a word. He stood, pacing the room for a moment. Okay, this might be about us. I nodded, swallowing hard. I was afraid of that. He ran a hand through his hair, then stopped and faced me. Look, we've been careful, but gossip is inevitable. We knew this wouldn't be easy. I sat silently, trying to process the sudden shift. Up until now, everything had felt like a secret, a fragile bubble we were tiptoeing around. Now, it felt like the bubble was about to burst, and I wasn't sure how much of us would survive. Do you want me to be there with you? Darren asked, sitting down beside me. I hesitated, then shook my head. No, I think if we go together, it'll look worse. I'll handle it. He took my hand, squeezing it. Whatever you need. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind raced through every possible scenario. Would we get a warning? Would this ruin everything? I kept replaying the moments at work, wondering if someone had overheard something or put two and two together. The next morning, I arrived early, heart pounding as I walked toward the HR office. The door was already open, and inside sat Marissa, the HR manager, looking professional but sympathetic. Thanks for coming in, she said, motioning for me to sit. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. We've received some reports about your relationship with Darren. Our company policy requires us to address this formally to ensure professionalism is maintained. I swallowed. I understand. She leaned forward. I want to be clear, this isn't an automatic punishment. We want to work with you both to set clear boundaries and avoid conflicts of interest. But transparency is key. I exhaled slowly, relieved it wasn't the nightmare scenario I'd imagined. Do you have any questions? She asked. Just one, I said. Will Darren be informed of this meeting? She nodded. Yes, but we'll handle it sensitively. I left the office feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. I knew this was just the beginning of navigating our relationship in the open. Later that evening, Darren and I sat across from each other at a small diner, the weight of the day pressing down on us. So? I asked quietly. He reached across the table, taking my hand. We can make this work. Policies or no policies. I'm in. I smiled, grateful. Me too. We spent the next few weeks drafting a plan with HR, keeping our relationship professional during office hours, disclosing it to the right people, and agreeing to prioritize work responsibilities. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments, whispers in the hallway, the occasional cold shoulder, but our connection only grew stronger. We learned to balance the highs and lows, finding comfort in stolen moments and honest conversations. One rainy afternoon, as we waited for an elevator, Darren pulled me close, his breath warm against my ear. Whatever happens, he said, I'm not going anywhere. I looked up, meeting his steady gaze. Neither am I. And in that crowded, noisy building filled with doubts and judgments, we found our own quiet space, two people choosing each other, no matter the obstacles. After that rainy afternoon by the elevator, Things between Darren and me settled into this strange, new rhythm. Work was different now. Not exactly easier, but somehow more honest. We weren't sneaking glances or hiding smiles anymore. Instead, we were navigating the tightrope of office romance with eyes wide open. One afternoon, about a month after the HR meeting, I was sitting at my desk when Darren popped his head around the corner. His usual confident stride was replaced by this hesitant, almost shy energy. My heart skipped. "Hey," he said quietly. "Got a minute?" I nodded, following him down the hallway to an empty conference room. The silence between us felt thick, charged with something unspoken. He closed the door behind us and leaned against the table. "I've been thinking about us, about what's next." I blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking every bit the vulnerable guy I'd come to know beneath that boss exterior. "I mean, we've been careful, sure, but I'm tired of half measures. I want to be open about this, with everyone, not just HR, but the whole office. I want people to know you're important to me." My stomach did this weird flip-flop. The idea of being that visible, dating the boss, knowing everyone would be watching, was terrifying. But the thought of Darren wanting that, wanting me openly, was sweeter than I expected. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," I admitted. "People can be judgmental." He nodded slowly, understanding. "I know, but I'm willing to face it if you are. I want to be proud of us, not secretive." I thought about the long nights we'd spent whispering in the dark, the stolen moments between conference calls, the way my heart warmed every time he smiled my way across the office. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. "Okay," I said, finally. "Let's do it." Darren grinned, relief flooding his face. You have no idea how long I've wanted to say that. The next few days were a whirlwind. We agreed to tell a few close colleagues first, people we trusted. That went better than expected. There were a few raised eyebrows, some teasing, but mostly support. When the news got around the office, the reactions were mixed. Some whispered behind closed doors. Others seemed awkward in meetings. But Darren handled it with his usual calm and professionalism, making it clear our relationship wouldn't interfere with work. One Saturday, a couple of weeks after going public, he invited me over for dinner. The apartment was cozy and filled with soft music. As we cooked together, I caught him watching me with this quiet admiration that made me blush. "Remember when I locked you in the car?" he asked, chopping garlic with dramatic flair. I laughed. How could I forget? That was the weirdest, most intense ride home ever. He smiled. "Well, I figured locking the doors was the only way to get your attention." I reached out, touching his arm. Mission accomplished. Later, as we sat on his balcony wrapped in blankets, the city lights shimmering below, Darren took my hand. "I'm glad we took this leap," he said softly. "Even with the challenges." "Me too," I replied. "I never expected my boss to become the best thing in my life." He leaned in, kissing me gently under the stars. Neither did I. From that night on, we faced the world together, partners in work, in love, and in life. And every time I caught Darren's eye across the office, I knew that ride home was just the beginning of an incredible journey. It wasn't all perfect, far from it. There were still awkward moments, gossip that sometimes made the office feel smaller than it was, and the constant balancing act between being professional coworkers and something more. But over time, those challenges became less daunting, softened by the quiet strength of what Darren and I had built together. One afternoon, about a year after that night in the car, Darren and I found ourselves sitting on the same stone wall outside my building where we'd first really talked. The city was buzzing around us, but we were in our own bubble again, that familiar easy space where conversation flowed without words getting tangled in nerves. He looked over at me with that same warm, steady gaze, and I felt my heart settle. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. I smiled, leaning into the moment. "All the time. From locked car doors to here, it's been one hell of a ride." He laughed softly, then reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "I was scared back then. About what people would think. About messing this up. But being with you, it's been worth every risk." I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of those words. Me too. I never imagined my boss could become my partner, but now I can't imagine my life without you. There was a comfortable silence as we watched the world pass by, the ordinary sounds of the city grounding us. No grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, just two people who'd found something real in the middle of the chaos. As the sun dipped low, casting everything in a warm glow, Darren leaned in and kissed me gently. It was the kind of kiss that held promises of patience, partnership, and all the quiet moments in between. Pulling back, he smiled. "So what's next for us?" I grinned, feeling that familiar spark of excitement mixed with calm certainty. "Whatever we want, together." And in that simple answer, I realized that sometimes the best stories don't need fireworks or grand finales. Sometimes they just need two people willing to take a chance, face the unknown, and build something honest, one day at a time. With Darren beside me, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be.